Hey guys, so I just want to talk about the roles in the temple. Now I haven't finished this, but I just decided that it felt right to start doing a video on it because it's pretty far along. Now what I've done is I've mapped out the roles so far of just in Second Chronicles I believe, Second Chronicles and onwards. Now one thing I learnt through this. So at the start, it mentions the Asherim. So an Asherim is basically translated to wood or a grove or anything that is sort of carved that it's become an idol. So it's usually like representative of worship. Some were like more trees. Some were just carved from trees, like poles. But basically, they were there for worshipping, false gods and idols. So it mentions that at the start. It starts talking about all these different roles. We see that there's a chief priest. Okay, the chief priest actually reports to the king about the abundance of the store and all the tithings that they received. We see in the story. We also see this other servant who's called Kor. Okay, he's son of Imnah, who's a Levite. Okay, and his job is over the freewill offerings to God. His job is to apportion the contribution reserved for the Lord. Okay, which I believe is the Lord's portion and the most holy offerings. Okay, so what this also does, it talks about the different offerings that were presented. So there was Hezekiah contributed for the burnt offerings, for the morning and evening sacrifices, and the peace offerings. Now these were written in the law. There was, obviously contributions to minister in the gates to the people. There were contributions to give thanks for the new moons. I actually didn't realize that the new moons were written in the law, okay, in this law that they're talking about, and the appointed feast days. Now, one important thing to understand is that everybody was given a portion. Okay, so if we think about this, the way that it works in a normal harvest, let's just say we go to Jerusalem. Okay, and we go to like up here, we go to like the barley harvest. Okay, so the early part of that harvest, before the harvest starts, is the first fruits. It's not completely ripe. It's at its prime. It's at the point where it's like at this perfect doughy stage where you bundle it up and you hand it over. Okay, that's the time where it's just at its prime. It's the best place where it is. Now when the harvest happens, that takes a period of time for the harvest to complete, and so the barley changes and matures during that time, and it dries out. Okay, so when the first fruits are presented, it has to be this particular dough, particular moisture content, and it has to be right, it has to be precise. That's the best portion. Okay, that's the absolute best portion of the harvest. Now that's given to the high priest. Okay, and then the high priest takes that into the temple, presents it before God, and then God will bless the harvest. The priests then receive that as their food, as their portion. Okay, so we see the grain, the wine, the oil, the honey, and all the produce of the field, even the cattle and the sheep. Okay, they're all actually included in that tithing to the priests. So the priests, their job in the temple, that they operate the temple, their job is to run the place. Their job is to run all the different sacrifices, to keep the sanctuary holy, to operate it basically, right? And so they all receive a portion. Okay, everyone receives their own specific portion, and that's from the first fruits. They all receive it from the first fruits. And there's two different groups, the Levites and the priests. Okay, they're slightly different, and there's some different rules there about how and who hands out their portion. Now understand that Jesus is the high priest. Okay, Jesus is the high priest of the temple, of this new temple. He's the high priest. That's the role he took on. Okay, so what he has to do is he has to present his first fruits to God to bless the harvest. You notice the pattern? Okay, the 144,000 are the first fruits redeemed from the earth. We see that they are in that prime position, like the medium dough barley. I think it's medium. The Aviv barley. Okay, they're at that perfect time of being ready, the perfect readiness. Okay, they're ready. And then what happens is when they're presented, okay, who gets the portion? Okay, I believe that Jesus gets his portion. Okay, and I believe they are his portion. You understand? I believe they are his portion. They're his portion. And then the harvest begins. Okay, so based upon this, let's have a look. So Hezekiah appointed the divisions of the priests and Levites, division by division, so like tribe, each according to his service. Okay, so they're appointed basically by their division, their group, or their tribe. The priests and the Levites are separate, and for burnt offerings, peace offerings, to minister, all those things we mentioned. Okay, the king contributed from his own wealth, okay, for some of these things to happen as well. Okay, he tithed to the temple. And he commanded the people who lived in Jerusalem to give a portion as well. So the king said to the people that live here, you need to give a portion to the operation of the temple. Due to the priests and Levites, they might give themselves to the law of the Lord. Okay? So the Levites and the priests, they don't live your typical life like we see in the city. They're dedicated to the temple. They're dedicated to retaining a holy life. Okay? They must live a holy life. And so they don't have your typical life. It's dedicated to the Lord. They're very specific in that operation. And so in order to do that, they don't work the fields. Okay, they don't work the jobs. People tithe, and that becomes their portion, their food, and their ability to sustain themselves and their families. Now their families, okay, are actually become part of it as well, which we'll see. Okay, so all the people in Israel give in abundance the first fruits of the grain, the wine, the oil, the honey, and all the produce of the field. Okay, and they tithe it back to the temple. Okay, back to the priests and the Levites. And the people of Israel and Judah who lived in the cities of Judah also brought in the cattle and sheep. Okay, so you imagine those Levites and those priests, or let's imagine the 144,000 and those that they have saved. Okay, or those people before they're redeemed, they have saved. Okay, that can be their contribution of the sheep that they've helped save as well, which could be a portion. Okay, which could be, that's just speculative. But we see what happens is that they start in June, okay, which is Pentecost, the pouring out of the Spirit. Okay, and then this continues. The tithing continues till September. Now, this period of time is where everything is pretty much like we see here, right? We've got the first fruits here. Okay, these are the first fruits. And then we see in June up until September here, where all the rest of the other summer fruits and whatever, they're all gathered. All right, so we see that everything's kind of built up and collected and stored. They end up with this massive abundance. Okay, so they see here we had eaten and had enough and had plenty left. For the Lord has blessed his people, so we have this large amount left. And so Azariah, the chief priest, he reports back to the king, right? And he says, we have eaten and we have plenty left. We have this large amount. Okay. And so we see that. He reports back. It's his job. The chief priest, not the high priest, but the chief priest, his job is to report back on the stores. Now we see these people, okay, these other groups, and they're assigned to distribute the food to the Levites in their cities where the Levites live. Okay, because the Levites don't receive the same parcel of land and other things that others do. They live in a city, in their cities that they're given. But their inheritance is the Lord. Okay, they have a different inheritance. Okay, so, but basically by division, depending on how you're enrolled into the priesthood, okay, whether it's by genealogy, so by your family line, okay, or by another means, by your tribe, there seems to be a differentiation between that. Depends on who gives you your portion. Okay, so we see down here, we see the sons of Aaron, the priests who are in the fields, they had some common land belonging to their cities, which they all shared by the sounds of it. Okay, there were certain men that were designated to give their portions to Aaron and his sons. Okay, that was their job. Okay, they seemed to share land with others, but and we see here that when these priests were enrolled, they were enrolled with all their children, their wives and their sons and their daughters. The whole assembly, all of them, because they are faithful in keeping themselves holy. So their families must live in the cities while they work in the temple. Understand? Okay, we also see here references in Hosea, okay, to Israel, how she worked for money and not for a portion. Okay, she played the whore. She loved a prostitute's wages on all threshing floors. We also see the reference of multiple threshing floors. Okay, multiple harvests potentially. Okay, we see that the threshing floor, the wine and the vat shall not feed them, and the new wine shall fail them. Okay, what's grown in the land will fail them. They won't have a portion. Okay, they won't have a portion. He's talking about those that don't come back to him, I believe. Okay, and then they'll be sent off to Egypt. Okay, they'll stay in the world and they'll eat unclean food. They won't take part of the harvest. They won't have from the abundance. Okay, and then when they pour out drink offerings of wine that are taken from the land, okay, they won't be blessed. Their bread will be like mourner's bread to them. Okay, all of it that eat it shall be defiled. The bread that they're eating won't be a gift from God on the land. Okay, so we see that this group that is turned away, at this time they won't be blessed at all. And then it says, well, what will you do on the day of the appointed festival? So what are you going to do when there's nothing bearing fruit? There's no, bountiful harvest on the day of the feasts. What are you going to eat? Okay, you'll not be given a portion to eat. Understand this goes back to God looking after us, and where part of man is we're prescribed a portion of the fruits of the earth. Okay, so like grapes in the wilderness, I found Israel like the first fruit on the fig tree in its first season. Okay, grapes are in June. Okay, the fig tree is July, August, September. Okay, the first fruit depending on when it is. Okay, so we see that same time period here as well. Okay, and we see Ephraim is also just confirmation when it talks about Ephraim, it's talking about the idols. But what I'm saying is that, to sum up, is that there is this absolute undeniable comparison here between this time, okay, which I was led to this time about the operation of the temple, the first fruits, how it works, how it's received, how it is the tithing for the priests and the Levites, okay, and even the Lord, he has his portion. They all have their portion reserved for them. Okay, that's their portion for operating the temple. We see in Luke and Matthew, there's no mention of Mark anywhere. Okay, but in Luke, he has his winnowing fork in his hand to clear his threshing floor. Okay, so at the time of Luke, which I believe is that first kind of watch period, or that first time period, okay, when the harvest is blessed to begin, after the first fruits are offered, after the 144,000 arrive on the scene, okay, we see here the first reference to the threshing floor, to gather the wheat into the barn, but the chaff here will burn. We don't see the next reference until Matthew, which is later, okay, which is in the later watch that we're talking about in the other video, where, he'll clear his threshing floor, same deal, right? But we see, it seems like there's a primary harvest and then there's another harvest. And then we see that reference to gleaning. Okay, after the wrath, there's not going to be much. This should be around this way. There's not going to be much left. All right, by the time it gets to here, these ones that have been in the storm, okay, there's not going to be much left. There's only going to be slim pickings by the time it gets to here. That's why I believe this Matthew group are going to be blessed, because whoever's left at the end, there's going to be nothing. There's not going to be many of them. I understand, because there'll be a lot of death. So I believe that this represents a gleaning, and that's where I've gotten up to. But understand, just to recap, Jesus is the high priest. He receives the first fruits. Okay, his portion, the 144,000. That's his portion. He presents them to God to bless the harvest. Okay, then he takes his portion. Okay, that's his portion. His 144,000. Now there's still more portions out of that. Okay, we see that there's leftovers out of that. Okay, because it's only 144,000 out of all the tribes of Israel, out of his bride. I believe they're a portion out of that. They're selected, to operate the temple. They're selected to run the sanctuary. Now I believe that I believe that some of those from the Mark group, they end up in the temple as well, but they have a different role, and I'm still working that out. So I believe that the 2 rooms, the Holy of Holies and the Holy Place, they're the rooms of the 144,000, with the singers, the Levites, the music, the people that look after the vessels, the leaders. All those people are all the 144,000. They're the kind of like the senior in the temple. Okay, and then I believe that the vestibule, the other part of the temple, okay, it's reserved for those others that are blessed with the 60 portion. Okay, I believe they're like the officers. They guard the doors. They, take care of a lot of the processions that are out and around the temple. I still need to put their roles down, but as far as I know, that's kind of where it's at. And then I believe that the 30 portion are those that are redeemed from the earth, the ones who were left till the very end. Okay, the ones who are right there standing until the very end, who have to endure right at the very end. Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm leading to at the moment, and it's all very fascinating. But honestly, like, it just poured out, and I didn't really have to think much about it. It all just started coming to me. So praise God and praise the Spirit for moving, and this is for somebody. So I hope you enjoyed. God bless.